Welcome to the Moms of Tweens and Teens podcast. If some days you doubt yourself and you don't know what you're doing, if you've ugly cried alone in your bedroom because you felt like you're failing, well, I just want you to know you're not alone and you have come to the right place. Raising tweens and teens in today's world is not easy, and I'm on a mission to equip you to love well and to raise emotionally healthy, happy tweens and teens that thrive. I believe that moms are heroes, and we have the power to transform our family and to impact future generations. If you are looking for answers, encouragement, and to become more of the mom and the woman that you want to be, welcome. I'm Cheryl Gould, and I am so glad that you're here. Hi, friend. Welcome to the show today, and I am so glad that you're here. And I hope that you know about me now, or maybe you're just tuning in for the first time, that we are all about being real here and being honest about our struggles. And lately, I have been walking through a challenging time and a challenging season, I should say, where I just feel like I have nothing. I don't know is my mantra, and I just don't know. I don't know the answer to this. I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know. And I see with myself and with many of us, we feel like we should know. We feel like we should have the answers. And I had a friend say to me yesterday, you know what? My husband was talking to me about praying and how, when we pray, we're just supposed to hand it over and say, God, take the mess. And I don't know exactly where you're at as far as all of that goes, but that was really comforting because sometimes it's just feels like too much and we don't know, and we're just walking day in and day out. And I can't think of a better podcast episode today and a better guest than Rachel Marie Martin, who gets it and understands it. Maybe you recognize her name, many of you. She is the amazing writer behind the site findingjoy.net. And I have followed her for years. And when her publicist reached out to me, I cannot tell you, I was over the moon because she's just amazing. And you're going to be so encouraged. She's written about divorce, heartbreak, reconnecting with an estranged child, dealing with an autoimmune disease in her youngest, feeling overwhelmed with littles, living through financial crises, waiting up for teens, and simply being overwhelmed and overjoyed by the day in, day out demands of motherhood. She's a mother now. She has 7, and then she remarried, and she is a stepmom of 4, which leaves her with 11. Can you believe it? And she actually has 5 teenagers right now living in her home. So unbelievable. And she is so encouraging. She believes in the power of the human spirit to overcome, to thrive, and to find deep joy. And because of that, she pours out her heart on many of the platforms that she's written and her own platform as well. And she's here today because she recently released her latest book, Mom Enough: Inspiring Letters for the Wonderfully Exhausting but Totally Normal Days of Motherhood. And this book you're going to hear her talk about it, but she offers encouragement, and she shares over 40 personal letters through her journey. So I can't wait for you to listen to Rachel. I was so encouraged when I hung up, and I can't wait for you to give it a listen. So let's dive in. Rachel, welcome to the Moms of Tweens and Teens podcast. I am so honored to have you here.
I am super excited to be here and just as honored.
I have been following you, I told you, for years and loved your writing. We've shared it. And when you came into my inbox about your new book, I was like, oh my gosh. So excited. And just, I mean, the millions of moms that know your writing and have been following you. And now you have compiled into a book so many of your letters that you have written to moms. And we're going to talk about that and your story and your journey. And I've been feeling so exhausted lately. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I have you today. I really need your encouragement. And I just want to tell them about the title of your new book. It's called Mom Enough: Inspiring Letters for the Wonderfully, I love that,
Yeah.
exhausting, but totally normal days of motherhood.
Yes.
And yeah, and what made you decide on that title?
Well, the title, so it was inspired by one of the most viral letters that I had written. And the letter was Why Being a Mom is Enough. And it just went crazy. And I remember when it went, like people, it was just about celebrating the simple things about motherhood. It was like, because moms are really hard on ourselves. We're like, I didn't get anything done, and we missed everything. We miss all the simple moments. And I like the title so much because, we're enough, even though sometimes we're like, wow, that was a terrible day. And I was told, moms, your track record for surviving terrible days is 100%. Like you have made it through every terrible day. It might have been messy, but you've made it. And I just want moms, especially in the social media world, to take that breath and know, you know what, I'm doing my best. I'm really enough. And that word, it's so powerful because enough means that we've become comfortable with who we are and what we bring to the table. And we live in a world of expectations, or the expectations we think are expectations, but they're really not.
Wow. I've never heard it explained like that. Like I feel like I want to write it down. That say that again, because we hear that so often, like, oh, you're enough.
Right.
And the way that you just explained it is that we actually, how did you say that? We're actually comfortable with we are when we
Yeah,
can
it's
say,
like getting into your own skin. Like I always say, it's like really liking who you are and not basing enoughness. I'll just make that word up if it's not one, on everything that we see on Instagram or Pinterest or Facebook or when we go to Target, but knowing that we're the right moms for our kids and we don't have to look like anybody else, and actually learning to like us. I really think that's super important. We tell our kids, like, you should like yourself and figure out who you are. And the mom enough is like, it's being comfortable and knowing that we're enough with who we are and who we were created to be.
hmm. And when you think about that in your own journey, tell them a little bit about your story because you've gone through a lot.
I
So
I have definitely. I joked in my first book. I said that I live a publicly private life is the way I refer to it, because there's enough people that kind of know who I am. Like I've had teachers that are like, they'll give me the little head nod and then they'll realize. So I realized that my life is, there's this public aspect to it, but there's also this part where I just keep some of it to myself or my kids' journeys and that publicly private means that as a writer, I've been willing to share some of my vulnerabilities because I truly, truly believe that when we share our vulnerabilities, we bridge the gap of loneliness that's in our world. Because the number one email I get all the time is I don't feel like I'm enough. I feel like I'm failing and I'm all alone. And though over and over, I can tell you I'm going to get one of those today. And the antidote to that isn't like, I'm going to do more, all of that. It's when we bridge the gap, we extend the hand, we say, hey, you know what? I have that struggle too, or I've gone through that. And when I started writing, it was like 2008. I started in the blogging boom, I'm going to say. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to write about. I just started writing and I just kept doing it every day, every day. And then there was a day where I wrote a letter and it was Dear Mom Who Feels Like She's Failing, and which is in the book. And the letter was written in response to an article that I had written the previous day that was 10 things moms, should remember. And this lady wrote back, her name was Angel, which I always think is really
Mm.
interesting. I'm like, the universe is so powerful here. And she said, I love what you write, but I feel like I'm failing. And then I remember thinking, well, if she feels like she's failing and I feel like I'm failing, I'm just going to write her back. And I wrote her a letter back, and then her email was anonymous. So I realized that what I had written was universal. And I had a friend that was like, you just need to publish this, just hit publish. And I had that like real nervousness in my heart. And I did, and it went viral. What's interesting about that for me is when I wrote that, I was in the midst of a really messy marriage. My first marriage was, I would say it wasn't rightly ordered. And I was trying to untangle myself from it. And I was dealing with my own, you should do this, or this is what a good mom looks like, or you're going to mess up your kids, or all of that. And then as that's happening, as my like getting my life back and deciding, you know what, this isn't the way I should be treated, or this isn't the right part of, the way life should be going. I was also writing. So my journey became public of like people, like I knew all of a sudden, as if I was going to be authentic, I'm going to have to share like going through a separation and all of that. And people would comment back like, you're so brave to share. And it just reinforce the idea that we don't talk about stuff like that, especially social media wise. Like it's just not talked about. And I grew up in the 80s when everything was hush hush. Like we don't talk about money. We don't talk about what our parents make. It was just like, you just hear like, we don't talk about that. And then I think I took the opposite, like, well, let's just talk about it. And for me, one of the things that I talked about a lot was in my first marriage, my finances it was a nightmare and it gave me tremendous anxiety. And I lived with fear and felt like I was failing and shame. And I started to change my life and change my financial story. And the irony, like where I once would never talk about it, the irony is I was on the Today Show talking about finances and healing your money story. And I thought, how powerful is that, that the very things that we are afraid of become the things that offer healing to other people?
I watched
Did
that
you?
interview. Yes, I did. And yeah, and how much your words have spoken and resonated with so many moms because we have so much shame around it. And I think that's, when I read your stuff, it's like it just goes really deep and it's those words that I need to hear that are so comforting. And I love how you said like it bridges the gap, vulnerability bridges the gap of loneliness. And yet
Mhm.
we're so terrified to be vulnerable because I don't know about you, but my belief used to be I'm going to be rejected,
Right.
that somebody's going to, like, I'm going to be showing, my ugly side, and people are going to be like, ugh, gross. Versus, and of course, we want to be responsible, right? But, instead, like, thank you that you're expressing what I'm feeling, but I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. And I appreciate that. I've learned that vulnerability for me as a writer, there's a lot of stuff that sits in my drafts. There's a lot of content that I'm like, you know what? No, it's just going to stay there because I want to do a couple things. I want to meet people, women, moms, where they are. I want to say like, listen, I get that because sometimes you just need that to know like somebody else. It might not be exactly it, but it's almost like they're seen. Like I'm not unseen anymore. And then I want to offer the encouragement, but I never want to leave people wallowing in it, like life is so bad, like that kind of moment of it. I always want there to be an element or spark of hope. Like, you know what? Maybe I
Yes.
can do this. Maybe I actually can do it. And if you look at like the failing, the dear mom who feels like she's failing, I didn't know that back then. Well, when I look back, I realized at the end, I ended it with, you know what, just do one thing. And that has been my mantra for the last 10 years. Like, if you don't know what to do, just choose one thing, do that, and then just do it to the best of your ability. And then you can say you've done it. And that to me is the biggest thing, is to leave people and moms with this little ember inside them that thinks, you know what, I can do this. I can do this. I can do that. Because there's a lot of times where I've had to tell that to myself, I can do this. I can do this. It's like that old book, what is it? The Little Engine That Could. I think I
Oh,
can. I think
yeah.
I can. I think I can. But my dad would read it to me all the time. And there's this power to that, like what you think you really become.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what is special about your writing is that you feel seen, but then you feel that hope
Yeah.
and that encouragement. And I don't think that's easy to do. Do you feel like your writing, has it been mostly that you're writing for yourself and then it ended up resonating with others?
I feel like yes and no. I feel like I write about stuff that I understand. Like moms will say, "Hey, could you write to me about raising a child with diabetes?" And I will say, "You know what? I can't. I can't. I have people that can because I never want to step into somebody's shoes and go, I get it. I understand what it's like." If somebody said, "Could you write about raising a child with celiac disease?" I'd be like, "Oh, yes, I can," because my youngest guy has that. Well, he's 14 now, but I can because I understand the nuances of it. So, but writing for myself, a lot of it is like there's one letter, and I'm trying to think, oh, is the motherhood days that we don't talk about, but we should. And
Mhm.
it actually shut down. It got shared so much that Facebook declared it as spam. And it was right during I think it was the Kim Kardashian movement with she had the image where there was like a champagne glass on her back and like water, and that went viral too at the same time. And I like Facebook, I had to like copy and paste images of it. Like I couldn't even republish it. And I had to appeal and all this stuff. And it ended up coming back on. But it was really about the days where it was my single mom days. And I think I started it off with the other day I went into my room and I just screamed into a pillow because I was so frustrated. And it wasn't like I was frustrated over the big things. I was frustrated over things that I felt like I shouldn't be frustrated over, milk spilled or kids needing me. And then had that guilt of, you're a bad mom. How can you be frustrated over milk spilling? And it's just all that stuff. And that one was really about that, talking about it. Or Dear Mom, you are stronger than you think. That was in the really hard parts of my divorce. And I needed to remind myself, and I knew if I needed to remind it, going back to the failing one, there's somebody else, that strength doesn't often look at like, finishing the marathon. While that's amazing, or all that other stuff, strength sometimes is the audacity to keep going. You know what? I have no idea how I'm going to get through this day, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to tuck you in. I'm going to read the book. I'm going to put the dishes away. And that's strong. And I really wanted to celebrate moms, but it was almost like I was like writing to myself in that moment, like, you know what, this is strong what you're doing.
Yeah. And you have 7 kids and then 4 stepkids.
I do. I do. It is crazy. My husband, like, we do a lot of speaking and he loves to be like, guess how many kids we have? I do. I have 7 kids. My first marriage ended. My youngest guy was 3, and it was the scariest thing ever because these 7 kids became my responsibility. And really, honestly, they have been, I have been the one to step up for them. And for me, part of doing the hard things was breaking a cycle and having their life story changed. Even though in that time, my kids were like, what is happening? Or they were mad or they're angry. I knew that if I didn't step up to the plate, I wasn't serving them in the way that they needed.
So actually, knowing that by leaving, that was going to be the healthiest thing for them.
Definitely. It was,
Yeah.
I think that when you're in a situation, you don't really, I would say to people to have a lot of grace for somebody that's getting out of an unhealthy marriage or dealing with something, because in the beginning you don't really see. I had lots of friends that would say, no, this is the right thing. And the farther I stepped back, I started to see, wow, that was so unhealthy. But I was living within paradigms that I thought couldn't be broken. I thought like one of my paradigms was good Christian women don't get divorced. It was just a paradigm that I had, and it kept me bound into something that wasn't right, wasn't the right thing. So I had to break down so many of my own ideologies. And in that process of that, I started to see, and then I started writing about it too. You can see this little morph of what I've written, as I guess, I guess I became alive again.
Wow. After being, yeah, feeling dead. Yeah, that belief, Christian women don't, this isn't, you're not a good Christian woman if you're getting divorced, and yet by
Mhm.
staying in something that's unhealthy
Right.
and having to overcome that. And I think that's one of the things I love so much about your writing is there's so much grace and compassion um, in your writing. And we need that so much when we're going through hard times because we're so hard on ourselves.
We
And
are.
I wonder if, as I've read so much of what you've written, do you feel like because you've been able to write and go through this growth process of having grace for yourself, that it's helped you to get where you are today as far as like achieving? Because I look at you, I'm like 7 kids, 4 step kids, married. You started a business with your husband. You have, millions of followers every month. I'm like, how did she do this? This like inspires me.
Oh.
And so how have you done that?
Well, there's a lot to it. I think that when you get that fire within you to change your life, that is extremely motivating. I needed to change my life. I needed to change my finances. I needed people not knocking on my door anymore, like going to turn off the gas or I needed that not to be my kid's story. And once you push a snowball, that's what I always give that analogy. Like once it starts moving. It's just that initial like deciding to push it and change it. For me, a lot of it is I always tell people I'm just a busy person. That is just my nature is to be doing stuff. One of the reasons I write about rest is because it's very hard for me to sit still. It's very, very hard for me to take that moment because I feel guilt and I don't even know where that came from. Like that guilt of like, well, you should be doing something else. Couldn't you be doing that? And this year I've been like, no, this is just as important just to sit. Um, for getting it done, it goes back to the do one thing every day. One thing, one thing, one thing. Like in 2022, I ran 1,000 miles, which I don't know what it got in my head, but I was like, hey, I'm going to do this. But it wasn't like 1,000 miles. I did it in a month. It was every single day. I would commit to just running a little bit, it was 3 miles or so, and I would write it down. I just made a giant grid checkbox in my notebook that I carry with me. And every time I'd come back, I was like a little kid. I'd fill in a little square and then I'd be like, woohoo, I've got a line done because I believe in that power. The power of small steps will change your life. Because I think social media, while I love it, I mean, it's my bread and butter. I love it. But it kind of gives us the illusion that we can change our life in 6 weeks. Like you can do this in 6 weeks and you can have 1 million followers in 6 weeks and blah, 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 blah. But it's tenacity and sticking with it and deciding like this is my lane. And even if they're doing all that stuff, it doesn't mean I have to do it. I'm going to stay here and serve my community. And that has been what it's always been, just staying here, dealing with like, oh, my own frustrations, but just just getting it done.
Mm-hmm. And I know you say that it's the little things that matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's taking those little steps, it's the little things that matter. And I think when we're micromanaging, you talk about that too. I was like,
Right.
oh, yeah, wanting to manage everything. But, you know, so much of that when you have teenagers and you have 3 chapters about
Mm-hmm.
teenagers in your book, and our moms are moms to tweens and teens, a lot of that is letting go of a lot of stuff. What have you found is the most challenging about having teenagers? And do you have four now? Four teenagers?
Oh my goodness. Let me think. 14, 14, 16, 16, 18, five teenagers in the
Five.
house.
Holy cow.
Right.
What is
So
that?
my bonus kids, they're the same age as my youngest two teenagers. So there's two 14-year-olds, two 16-year-olds, 18-year-old. I'm going to tell you that our insurance agency loves us. We probably pay for the sign right now because of the car and driving. But so I actually really like the teenage years. I think one of the things I tell moms this all the time, I'm sure you do too, is to never tell like when moms with little kids, just wait till they're teenagers.
Oh,
Because I
yeah.
think it sets that precedent, like it's going to be awful. But I think the teenagers are amazing because you get to see these people emerge from like, you're like, oh my goodness, that's why you like to do that when you were little, or all of that. Now, that being said, teenagers are moody, but this is where the grace part comes in. Like sometimes I think we forget what it's like to be that age. Like we forget our own stories and that hormone thing. I mean, I
Oh,
just have to remind myself they don't know what's right, what's up, what's down, all of that stuff. And there's so much noise coming at them. And especially like when they're tweens, I think that that's a really hard age. I have a very vivid memory of one day being in my bedroom when I was a little girl or tween and not knowing if I should play with my Barbies. Like I remember thinking, well, I want to, but then I remember thinking, but I'm too old for that. But I want to, and I'm too old for that. And it was that back and forth, and it was so confusing. And so I try really, really hard to remember, like, okay, that's okay. Or to give them space, like because because I tend to micromanage and want to know everything. Like if I drive the kids to school, it was my son Caleb who's graduating this year. One year, a couple years ago, I was driving him to school, and the whole way I thought I need to talk with him, see how it's going. And finally, he's like, "Mom, seriously, like on the bus, it's my quiet time." He goes, "No offense, but I just need it to be quiet because I'm going into school and I need to prep to go in there." And I immediately felt a little bit like, oh, how could you say that to me? Like taken aback. And I thought, no, no, no. He's expressing himself to me. He's telling me like, I don't need you to create more noise in my life. I just need you to be here in the car with me.
that's so great that he was able to say that. Like, we don't think about that. Like, I'm prepping to go into school. Like, mentally, I'm gearing up
Right.
that, it's stressful
Right.
being
And
a
they have no
teacher.
control. Right. When they're in school, like I was watching him yesterday. I went to get his passport and he was doing homework in the car. And I said to him, I'm like, you only have 2 months of this left until you're not under the jurisdiction of the school. Like when you go to college, I'm like, it's more you, it's your responsibility. But like that idea, like, he can't, when you're in school, you can't leave the hall without a hall pass. So that's stressful. I would like choke if that was me.
It's so stressful. And
Right.
today it was when we were young, but it's a whole different ball game now.
It is. There's a lot of different stressors for them now. And so I have learned grace. A lot of that is a big thing for me is the word grace. And I always joke too, I have a daughter named Grace. So
Uh,
I feel like the universe, God was telling me, you need to incorporate grace in your life. And it's funny because she's just a spitfire and she's in her 20s now. But when she was young, oh my gosh, she was just, I'd be like, Grace, 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 Grace. So she has taught me like, okay, embrace that part of life.
yeah, it's funny that she's named Grace and she's a Spitfire. It's all
Oh,
like God, the universe knew you needed to name her Grace. So you could
right.
just say it over and over again to yourself.
Oh, yeah. It became a mantra, a chant for many years.
You also write about the silence,
Oh,
the
yes.
silence of the teenagers. And I know that's really hard for moms when they're cocooning in their room, when they're not talking. How have you navigated the quiet?
Um, I look for opportunities when they're not quiet. Like most of the time, if I get them in the car, they'll talk, which is a weird dichotomy. They'll just, and I'm so grateful for that. But the silence, I've discovered now with having so many teens that there's this blip of time, and I don't think my youngest one is completely gone. He might have skipped it, like 13 to 15, where it's
Mhm.
just they just get so quiet and so moody and so like we don't know anything anymore. And I think actually many of my kids, like the older, like, "Ugh, really, you don't know anything." Like they go through that, but it's not bad. That's the thing I'd want to tell moms all the time is it's not really necessarily a slam against us. It's that they're trying to become independent. They're trying to like figure out who they are and figure out their voice. And they're getting like these messages like, be you. And then we're as the moms like, don't do that. So there it's this navigation of I really say that motherhood is like when they're little, you hold on to them really tight and it's releasing the grip of your hand until you let go, but they know your hand is always there for them.
Mhm. I agree with a 13 to 15. That's a time when they start clamming up more. I remember our daughter, our youngest, not one, I'm sure it happened with the older two as well, but I especially remember her because she was a baby
Mm-hmm.
where she didn't want to go out to eat with us. I was at the grocery store, like the kids from school showed up. She was running around the corner to not be seen with me. It was
Yes.
time. And then they come out, then they come out of it. And I think it is around 15
Mm-hmm.
where that seemed then she could have dinner with us again, go out to a restaurant. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's hard to not take for me it's hard to not take it personally
Oh, yeah.
because I tend to take things personally in general. Like I've
Mhm.
had to work through that a lot. Like I've written about the fact that I'm like overly sensitive, but and I really think for me, we're their safe place. It comes down to that. Like
Mhm.
they know I'm going to love them and I'm going to show up for them no matter what. And they live in a world where, especially with social media, everything they do or say, people are watching and judging. And sometimes they just need to have that
Mhm.
safe space. And my mother actually told me that sometimes when I was a teenager, she could tell if I was in a bad mood or whatever. I'd play the piano really loud, but sometimes, and I'm like, wow, you are a superwoman. She would intentionally get me mad at her because she knew I was keeping everything inside and I needed to get it out. Like she would like, I'm like, what? You unleashed the beast.
And it worked.
It did. It did. It would get me mad. And then I would end up sharing what I was keeping inside. And I've always wondered if that insight has made me realize that the longer we keep stuff inside, it's just like it tethers you down. It's speaking it or getting it out or sharing it that allows you to move forward.
Mhm. Do you remember what she said to you? Because she pushed a little bit. She pushed just enough.
I have no idea. I mean, I really don't, because I was a fairly moody teen, but I think it's because I'm a real introspective person. And I was bullied a lot in school, like terribly. And when that happens, you just take it on like it's me, it's me, it's me, it's
Yeah.
me. Like as a kid, I was like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I be good enough? What? And I didn't have the tools yet to realize, you know what, it really wasn't me. It was that situation and maybe that's I just talking with you, I'm like, well, maybe that's part of the grace part and being empathetic to people and seeing people because you just don't know another person's story.
Yeah. I relate to the being bullied piece because I was really bullied. My maiden name is Ween.
Hmm.
Terrible. Wieners, weenie,
Oh,
really sensitive. And
right,
you believe it. Like I just remember thinking and like being told I was a dog and I was like, or I was a weird kid. And
right,
now I look at pictures, I'm like, I wasn't a dog. Like
right.
I wasn't weird. I was a little different and I was sensitive. So I was great to bully because I would usually cry, and so that just fed it,
Ditto.
you know. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
but yeah, going through those things can make you stronger. And I know that's like a platitude, but really like the empathy piece and the
Mm-hmm.
understanding piece. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So that's really important to remember what it's like. And you write that in the book when we were teens.
Mm-hmm. And even if we don't, just like for me being in my late 40s, like there's a lot of hormone stuff happening. Like I almost like need them just to be able to be human,
Mm,
or I've told moms this too, like when you and I were in school, there wasn't Skyward, like where you could check grades all the time. Like my parents didn't know my grade. They knew my grades at midterm and the end of the quarter, right? And then if there was a problem, the teacher would message. Well, nowadays I could go on right now and look instantly at all the kids' grades and look and be there. And I've had to learn to step back and not micromanage that. Like to give them a chance. Like I could see like, ooh, you got 2 late assignments and they might not even be late. It might just be that tech teacher hasn't entered them yet and all of that. But if I'm micromanaging it so much, I'm not giving them the opportunity like I had to go, whoa, I got a low grade in this class. I'm going to get it up before the grades go back. And so for me, that's been a lot of being a mom of teenagers too, is to let them make mistakes and fix them. I don't have to fix it all for them. Like, okay, you're gonna have to deal with this, fix it, or to not micromanage, to not constantly look at everything. And okay, where are you right now? Like, my mom and dad used to drop me off at the mall and be like, be at the back door by the arcade at 9. And I was just there. Like I knew like they're going to be there. And if I'm not there, I'm in trouble. And nowadays I could, look at an app and go, ooh, they're driving 72, so it's just this
I
give and take.
know. I know. And it can just make you crazy feeling like, yeah, looking at everything and watching the grades. And if they're missing an assignment,
Right.
that's a big part of it. In the membership, I use a backpack analogy, and we actually have this exercise where like what belongs in their backpack and what's in
Oh,
our
amen.
backpack. And
So
actually
good.
writing that out, because having 5 teenagers, imagine if you were hyper focused on all of them. You would not be doing what you're doing now. You would not have a good relationship with them. You couldn't do what you're doing. And so having our own lives and focusing on those things, and that a lot of that grace piece, I mean, letting them be human, letting them make mistakes, it's freeing. Like
It
I
is
feel
freeing.
this amount of freedom hearing you talk.
It is freeing. I think a lot of it too comes back to going back 10 years when I really had to like take back my life. Like moms well, how did you do that? And I tell moms too, there's these different seasons. And that season for me was I call it the harvest years of motherhood. Like I had to work so hard. Like I called it the harvest because I had a grandfather that was a farmer in Minnesota. And when it was harvest time, when we came to visit him, he wasn't like playing on the floor with us. He was in the field working, but I never ever doubted, does grandpa love me? I just knew grandpa loved me. And sometimes for moms, we have to go through these seasons where we have to work really hard and it might mean Taco Bell for dinner or all this stuff. And it doesn't look like what everybody else is doing, but it doesn't mean that it's bad. And during that time, I also learned I had to let go of some of the control because I couldn't be micromanaging that and doing all of this. I would have burnt out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Rachel, gosh, it's just so good. Everything you share and your book, and do you find that moms are putting it like on their coffee tables? Have you heard that? Because it's so beautifully illustrated. I mean, you have beautiful pictures in there too. And it's just kind of read what you need to hear for the day, is how
That,
I look at the book. What
yeah,
do I
that's what I think it
need
is. Yeah,
today?
that was my goal was that um you're not going to want to probably read it all the way through. You're just going to be like, okay, what do I need today? And or I feel like I'm failing and there's that whole section on that or I have the teenagers or letting go and it really is meant to be kind of like that kind of gift book, but for me it was having that friend that you need at 3 a.m. when that time when you feel alone that there's somebody else out there that gets it and that's been there. And the idea that these letters have been shared millions and millions of times means that a lot of people get it. A lot of moms get it. And because of that, if you're feeling it, you're not alone.
Mm-hmm. And we need we need those reminders. That's what I love about reading your words is it's like, I need to remind myself as I read it. So you
Yeah.
can read it over and over and over again and pick what you need. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And, you know, I always say if you just do that one thing, man, 365 days of doing one thing, you will not be in the same spot you were a year ago.
Yeah. Well, aligned with that, to the mom that you've said so many good things, but is listening today, and she's just really feeling that despair and that discouragement and lack of hope, what would you want to say to her?
Well, first of all, I would say, I see you or I hear you, and you're not alone. Because I do think that when you feel that lack of hope, it can be a really lonely spot. And it can be a spot where you think, like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. And so there's all that other guilt. And I just want to encourage her to take that breath. I talk a lot about like inhale, peace, and inhale hope, and exhale all the stuff that's you're holding on to. And then to start to see all the little things that you've done every day that really make a difference, and to not discount them. Because I say, if you load the dishes, it counts. And you tuck them into bed, you read a story, you sat in the pickup line, you sat on a bleacher where it hurt your bottom. It goes on and on and on. And all that stuff matters. And then I would leave it with, you got to do one thing every day for your own heart, because it goes back to that, the used analogy of put your oxygen mask on. You got to put yours on before your child's. And I lived a life where I didn't take care of my heart, and it was suffocating. And when you start taking care of your own heart and doing, even if it's like, they can watch something on Disney Junior or whatever it's called now, and I'm going to read a book for 20 minutes. That counts. Or I'm going to take the long way home and just breathe. But you got to take care of yourself. So just do one thing every day for yourself. Make a cup of coffee or walk around the block, call a friend. But the more you start investing in your own heart, the more you'll start to free up space to give to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. We have to remember, honor our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
So, Rachel, tell them where to find you. So many people already know you that are listening, but where to find you and your book and all of that.
All right. Well, the most popular place people find me is on Facebook. It's Finding Joy blog. So if you type it in, my face will pop up. And otherwise, I'm also on Instagram. I have one of those Instagram handles with the underscore. It's finding_joy. And then my website is findingjoy.net. And my book, Mom Enough, is available at Amazon and Books A Million and Barnes and Noble and the local bookstores too. So I always say I encourage people to check them out too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for all you do and for being here for all of us and just speaking these comforting, compassionate words of grace today, because we all need it.
Well, thank you. I'm very honored to be able to be here and to share. And I just want to kind of end with, for most of history, women have asked and pleaded for a voice to be heard. And this online platform has given so many of us a voice. And it would be a shame to let it be polluted with rudeness and all of that. So that is one of my things is, when you're on there, just be kind and to celebrate the opportunity that we get to share with each other.
Love that. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today. And thank you, friend, for joining me. And if you want more encouragement, if you are in need of resources, if you want to surround yourself with more accepting, non-judgmental, loving, real community. I encourage you to go over to momsoftweensandteens.com, get on our newsletter. We have so many exciting things that are happening, so much to share with you to help you on your motherhood journey through these tween and teen years. So check it out, get on the newsletter, and I am just so grateful for you and that you are here. So I will see you back here next week, and have a good one.